Hello, team. Thank you all for joining. We'll wait for some more time while the others join in. So, today we are going to have a very interesting presentation about the fears, doubts, and uncertainty about KSA data privacy compliance. Is the voice clear for you all?
Yes, Amrita, it's clear.
Maybe we'll put in the chat as well. Yeah, Mukund already mentioned it in the chat. Yeah, I see a few more people joining the session. Mukund, maybe let's just wait for one more minute before we start.
Oh, yeah, sure, absolutely. Why don't you tell the people who are there what to expect in this data privacy webinar? What's going to happen? How are you going to use case studies? Just talk a little bit about that so that, everybody knows that what to expect from the
Sure,
session.
sure. Yeah. So today's presentation webinar, we are going to have we are going to discuss everything about the PDPL compliance, how we are helping organizations across Middle East, especially in Saudi Arabia, in becoming PDPL compliant. What are the common questions that we hear from customers? What are the approaches, the best practices that we follow, and we have also lined up some very interesting case studies, real world case studies that will help you give you insights about how other organizations have seen the PDPL compliance. Yeah. And we have an expert panel lined up today. They are the experts in terms of data privacy. They have helped a lot of organizations across Middle East. So yeah.
Yeah, so Amrita, I think we should start right now with the introduction, and then let's move.
Sure. Thank you, Mukund. A very good afternoon, everyone. Today, we from Ahlan Cyber team welcome you all to our webinar focused on KSA Personal Data Protection Law, its implementations, the operational challenges, and how organizations ensure compliance with the KSA PDPL requirements. Whether you are a business owner, you work in legal or compliance, or are responsible for data protection, understanding the PDPL is becoming increasingly important now. Uh, we have received a lot of questions from our customers across the kingdom about the PDPL, what it covers, who it applies to, how to get started with a data privacy program, and what compliance look like in practice. So that's the exact reason why we are hosting this webinar, to answer those common questions, clear up any misconceptions that you have, and help you better understand the path to PDPL compliance. We also included some very interesting real world case studies that will offer practical insights and lessons that you can apply within your own organization. So, thank you for joining us today, and we hope you find the session informative and valuable. Let's get started. A quick intro from my end. I am Amrita Kamalon. I am a key account manager in Ahlan Cyber with over 7 years of experience in data privacy and GRC. Let me also introduce you to the speakers for today's webinar. It's my pleasure to introduce Smriti Pradhan, Delivery Head for Data Privacy at Ahlan Cyber. She has worked with more than 40 organizations across industries like banking, retail, government, real estate, and large enterprises, helping them navigate their data privacy journey. She is known for her practical approach, her deep expertise in data privacy, and her ability to make complex privacy topics easy to understand. I'm sure you will find her insights both valuable and relatable. Our next speaker is Hifsa, one of our experienced data privacy lead consultants at Ahlan Cyber. She has worked with several organizations across Saudi Arabia, helping them navigate KSA PDPL requirements. Her practical experience working with KSA organizations gives her a strong understanding of the challenges businesses face in their PDPL compliance journey. I would also like to introduce Divyansh, data privacy lead consultant at Ahlan Cyber. He has helped organizations across industries implement practical data privacy and compliance programs. Most recently, he successfully led the planning and implementation of a privacy program for a leading bank in Saudi Arabia, bringing valuable hands on experience with PDPL compliance. Well, that was a brief intro. And as we get started, we have a very specific agenda today. Smriti, would you like to speak about the key areas we would be covering today?
Sure, Amrita. Thank you so much for that brief. So the agenda for today's session is going to be very specific. We are going to focus on KSA PDPL key requirements. From a law perspective, we are also going to cover an overview of the regulatory framework. Our key focus is to provide an insight into how to start your journey towards PDPL. Some discussions would be from the real life implementation challenges and the target state objectives for any PDPL program. We thank you all for joining our session, and we expect the session to be insightful. Please feel free to drop your queries as part of the session. Now, for many organizations, there is a chance that a lot of organizations, they are starting with their privacy journey. It is very important that we understand the regulatory framework of KSA PDPL and why KSA PDPL is important today. Hifza, could you please explain who the PDPL applies to and what type of organization should be paying attention to it? What is the focus of the law when it comes to the data that it takes into account? Could you please provide an overview on that?
Yeah, thank you so much, Smriti, for setting up the stage and welcoming the audience. And thank you all for joining. As Smriti already highlighted the agenda, we will start with the basic introduction of the law and overview of Kingdom of Saudi Arabia Data Protection Law, commonly referred as KSA PDPL. The KSA PDPL was introduced to establish a comprehensive legal framework to regulate how personal data are collected, processed, managed, saved, and protected within the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia. We all know that the organizations increasingly rely on personal data to deliver the product services, to manage the customer relationship, and to improve the business operations. Organizations needs to ensure the responsible handling of personal data. It has become a key regulatory and business requirement now. The law was initially introduced in September 2021, and the amended PDPL, along with its implementing regulation, was established on 14th of September 2023. SADAYA, which is Saudi Data and Artificial Intelligence Authority, enforced the implements of PDPL. Completely overseeing the compliance, managing the data protection policies, and ensuring organization adhere to the law. The key objective of KSA PDPL is to protect the privacy rights of the individual, enhance the trust between the organization and data subject, and establish a clear obligation of entities processing personal data. Moving ahead to the next slide. Yes. Now that we have already understood the background and introduction of KSA PDPL, the next important question that comes to everybody's mind is, does this law applies to our organization or not? See, the applicability of KSA PDPL is determined primarily based on where the personal data processing is taking place and whose personal data is being processed. The KSA PDPL applies to two main scenarios. The first scenario is when personal data processing taking place within the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia or outside. This means that any organization wherever it is public or private entity, the processes, if it's processed personal data within the territory of Saudi Arabia, the KSA PDPL applies to them. Now, the term territory of Kingdom of Saudi Arabia interprets broadly. It includes not only the physical geographical boundary of Saudi Arabia, but also the locations in outside the Saudi Arabia that exercises its authority, such as the diplomatic embassies located outside the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia. Now, the second scenario where the personal data of individual residing in Saudi Arabia processed outside the kingdom, This highlights the extraterritorial application of KSA PDPL. In simple terms, the organization located outside the Saudi Arabia may still need to comply with KSA PDPL requirement if they process personal data of individual who resides in KSA PDPL. The term KSA resident is not limited to the Saudi citizen. It includes Saudi nationals, people residing in Saudi for a very long time, and also individuals who are temporarily present in Kingdom of Saudi Arabia, depending on the nature of the processing activity. Moving ahead. With this, we have the polling question, which you can see on the screen. I would appreciate you to answer the question from the poll. The question is, what is your biggest challenge when it comes to implementing data privacy law? Now, we have three options, as you can see from the screen. Lack of qualified professionals to take initiative, unable to convince the board and top decision makers to invest, and not sure which department must own the responsibility. I would give you a moment to respond.
I mean, the reason why we are asking you this polling questions is to kind of understand better and probably tweak or overemphasize some areas that need to be elaborated.
Giving a little more time for people to respond. Mukund, do we have the results ready?
Yeah, but before we go to the result, I just have a question for Smriti. Smriti, 55% of the people have said that we don't have lack of qualified professionals to take initiative, and 36% people say we don't know which department owns the responsibility. Is this similar to the other clients that you have, the other 45 cases that you've implemented? What typically happens and why is this situation?
Yes. So thank you for sharing the polling results, Mukund. Yes, it's a very common challenge that we have seen across the organizations. From a governance standpoint, it is very important that the right stakeholders take the accountability of driving this whole program. Now, when you look at a data privacy law, typically the experience that you require cuts across multiple areas. One, you should know how to interpret the law well, which requires legal expertise. You should also be technically sound to understand which part of the law focuses on, enforcing cybersecurity controls. And lastly, how do you operationalize the law requirements into control requirements? So you also need to understand business. So today, if there is any professional who has joined us from the region and they're planning to start their journey forward, in terms of governance, this is not typically a technical role. This requires both legal and technical expertise if you want to drive your data privacy program. Point number one. Point number two, when it comes to the team's accountability today, if you look at the larger organizations, specifically if I talk about some of the trends from the kingdom, they have the respective data privacy offices. So yes, typically if there is any IT team who's planning to look forward to, take the accountability of the whole program, it may not be successful. So there are data privacy offices set up specifically to run data privacy programs. Probably the initiative can start with GRC teams and cybersecurity teams working together, but eventually going down the line, you would have to, look forward to specific roles of data privacy officers or data protection officers. So that's the requirement, and it's a very common challenge. And we understand this because Federal laws are not very common in Middle East. Saudi was the first country which implemented it. It's enabled now. But yes, that's how organizations should be looking forward to it in terms of expertise and in terms of governance and accountability. Now, with that, thank you, Hifza, for setting the context of the scope of this law. Just to reiterate to everyone, like Hifza mentioned, the scope of the law is basically the law is all framed to protect the rights and the freedoms of the individuals who are the residents of Kingdom of Saudi Arabia. From a data perspective as well, the scope of the law is very much focused on personal data. So when I say personal data, any data that can identify an individual associated with your organization will be under the scope of this law. So let's say if your organization today handles your customers' data, or any individual from your vendor life cycle, or any individual from your business to business relationship, if their personal data is entering into your organization, you know that the KSA PDPL law is going to be applicable. Now, having said that, for organizations, they might be just starting with the privacy journey, but privacy today is no longer just about meeting regulatory requirement. It's about building trust and enabling responsible innovation. Now, with that perspective in mind, Divyansh, could you walk us through why privacy has become such a strategic focus for organizations and what is driving this shift?
Thank you, Smriti. So, for us, I think the first thing that we need to understand is as a consumer or as a data subject, whenever we are dealing with any organization, what would be our own reaction if we see that the data in the organization is getting mishandled? This may be in the scenarios like a data breach on your personal data in the hands of any organization, or you getting any spam emails, any spam calls. So that is one of the larger concerns, that you as an organization need to be responsible for the personal data that you are processing for anyone, be it your customers, be it your employees, be it even the third parties you are dealing with. And that is also seen in the latest trends. So, as we can see from one of the IAPP reports, that more than 60% of the customers have taken direct actions like deleting the app, switching services whenever they feel that privacy is at risk. And they are genuinely very, very concerned about the online privacy for the data that is getting left in the hands of different organizations. And this is the reason why privacy as a risk is becoming very common to the organization, because regulatory compliance is just one part of the story. The major concern is around the loss in business, the loss in customer trust that comes when their data is not properly handled and when proper policies and procedures are not effectively enforced within the organization. This is also backed by one of the other studies from the IAPP and KPMG privacy risk study, where 93% of the organizations ranked that privacy is one among the top 10 business risks. This not just the regulatory risk we are talking about, but it is now coming as a business risk for us. And more than 36% organization placed it in the top five. From that perspective, we also see that compliance is being strictly enforced and monitored by the Saudi's Data and AI Authority. While the original deadline that was given was for 14 September in 2024, but now we see the active enforcements that are in place by SEDAIA. So just 2 weeks back, we had a report from SEDAIA that more than 40 plus organizations were audited. They were asked to tell to SEDAIA what policies have been implemented, what personal data they are sitting on as an organization, how have they understood all the risks that they pose or the harms that they pose to data subjects as they process their personal data, and what steps they have taken to mitigate those risks. And from that perspective, penalties are a greater and an upcoming concerns for the organization, because up to 5 million SAR can be the penalty in terms of the non-compliance with the PDPL related requirements. And the organizations should actively register with SEDAIA, report their processing activities, have a proper process set up to govern the data privacy related activities within organizations, have a data privacy office set up. This is how we see privacy becoming an increasing focus in the region for different organizations. From that perspective, we will move on to the next polling question, which will help us understand whether you, as an organization, have identified different data privacy regulations that might be applicable to you. Please answer to us with a yes or no so we can understand what's the trend around and can channelize the discussion accordingly.
Many of the organizations that I had interacted with, most of the time, the answer is no from them because they are unclear about the regulations that are applicable to them. Smriti, what is your take on it? You have worked with many organizations in the Middle East. What was, how was it for you?
Yes. I'm not sure what the polling results are, but as per my experience, specifically from a consulting standpoint, when we work with organizations, we see that there are certain organizations who are typically, functioning in a single regulatory environment. So when I talk about some of the organizations in Kingdom of Saudi Arabia, there might be a possibility that only KSA PDPL is applicable to them because their services are catering towards the resident of Kingdom of Saudi Arabia. However, there are also organizations within the kingdom itself, and typically I would talk about the industries here. When you look at large retail industries or large conglomerates which have multiple subsidiaries across Middle East, there is a possibility that more than one law may be applicable. So for the organizations with whom I have worked specifically, which are working in a multi-subsidiary model, we see that sometimes not only KSA PDPL, but also multiple requirements like UAE PDPL, GDPR are also applicable. The reason for that is today they have a customer base which is not just in the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia, but they also have a customer base and have their services being directed to customers in Europe, or let's say to customers which is outside the kingdom. So anytime you start with your privacy journey, it's very important for you to understand your legal and regulatory environment. You may be an organization which is having multiple business operations across multiple countries. In those cases, there is a high possibility that your legal landscape will be beyond KSA PDPL. Multiple regulatory requirements might be applicable. Now, with that, before we dive into specific requirements of KSA PDPL, it is very important to recognize that privacy compliance today is not simply just about understanding a regulation. It is more of a culture that organizations need to build when they go forward towards this program. If we can move on to the next slide, please. Now, for many organizations which are operating today, and this is completely as per our experience, even within the kingdom, right? Particularly holding companies and large retail conglomerates, this can be quite a complex journey because they have multiple subsidiaries, multiple customer bases, and building a privacy program in such organizations can be tougher time to time. Similarly, any organization that is planning to build a privacy program, they need to understand their business operations really well. Because whenever you're building a privacy framework, it has to be very customized to the business of the organization. You have to understand the scale at which you operate. You have to understand the regions to which you cater to, specifically your customer base. So this is a prerequisite for building the foundation of any data privacy framework. Also, a very common misconception that we have seen when we are working with privacy professionals across GCC, and specifically when we are working with data privacy officers in the kingdom, we have also seen that there is a misconception regarding adopting a certain technology and suddenly the technology solving all your privacy problems. However, it is very important that we have to understand that in order for your compliance objectives to be achieved, it's always better to start with building the privacy foundation for your organization. That would typically include the policies, the processes, and the framework that would govern the privacy program for your organization. Technology is always an enabler, and you only use it to leverage on what is already built. So it is very important for organizations to define clear policies, the measurable outcomes they want to get out of their privacy program, and then they incorporate a tool and technology that would complement your policies and procedures. So this is something that you need to keep into mind when you are executing a data privacy program. And all these data points need to be fixed before you enter into privacy journeys. Now, successful privacy programs don't happen through technology alone. They obviously require your leadership commitment, clear governance, and accountability across the organization. Over to Hifza to talk about the strategies for effective implementation.
Thank you, Smriti. Now, let me take you through the 3 key strategies which we have defined basis our experience with our ongoing customers and the customers that we have already worked with. Is that the organization needs to focus on effective implementation of privacy. The first and the most important strategy is to embed the privacy into corporate governance. Privacy should be established as a priority at the highest level of the organization, including the executive management and the board. Organizations should integrate privacy consideration into overall risk management strategy, similar to what we generally implement in cybersecurity or operational risk or financial risk. The approach should be top to bottom, where the management is completely aligned with the seriousness of the requirement and is ready to provide the right platform and the resources for the implementation. The second strategy that we have collated here is to adopt a holistic view of data governance. Now we know that privacy concept does not operate, in isolation. Effective privacy management requires alignment with the broader data governance practices. Organizations should integrate privacy requirement with the existing data management capabilities such as data classification, such as data security, data lifecycle management, and governance process. By taking a holistic approach to the data management, organization can improve the visibility of the personal data, where the personal data is residing, what type of controls we have implemented on the personal data, how is it being used, why is it being used, and do we have any excess amount of data that we do not need to retain. So all the appropriate safeguards need to be taken into consideration, and that could be done only when we have the complete data visibility. Now, the third strategy is to prepare for the future. Privacy landscape is continuously evolving globally with new regulations and new guideline and new technologies emerging every single day. Organizations should be avoiding building compliance programs that only address the current requirement. Instead, they should establish an adaptive privacy program that can evolve as a regulation and business as the business needs change. Now, moving ahead to the next slide. As we have already walked you through the implementation strategy of privacy, this is our experience that we have. I would also like you to walk you through the different requirement of data privacy that the KSA PDPL has put forward. The first is personal data discovery and classification. Organizations should begin by identifying the type of personal data that the organization possess across their environment and classify it based on the sensitivity of the personal data. We should be able to identify if we have generic personal data or sensitive personal data residing in our environment and classify it according to that. The second type of requirement that KSA PDPL has asked us to implement is the assessment that need to be conducted. Now there are various type of assessment that has to be conducted, one being the DPIA. These assessment help the organization in identifying the privacy risk before introducing any new system, any new process, any new technology. Now, apart from privacy impact assessment, there are various other assessments as well, such as vendor risk assessment, transfer impact assessment, and also legitimate interest assessment. These are case-to-case basis assessment that we need to conduct based on the processing activities that is happening in an organization. The third component is data subject rights, which says that the organization should, we have to go back, Devansh. Yes, the organization should establish clear process to enable individuals to exercise their rights. There are certain rights given by KSA PDPL to the individual, which could be right to access the information, right to rectify the information, delete the information where applicable, or withdraw the consent if if the processing activity is based on the consent. So these rights of the customer has to be met. The fourth element mentioned on the screen is consent management. With the consent is the legal basis for processing. Organization should implement the mechanism to avoid any, taking any invalid consent. Also to maintain the record of the consent and allow individual to withdraw their consent whenever they feel so. Next is dedicating a data privacy team or data privacy office, and also implementing data breach notification requirement. Now, there could be a possibility that an organization has faced a data privacy breach. In that scenario, what the organization is required to have is to have a notification provided to the regulatory authority within 72 hours of the breach. Similarly, when we talk about having a governance model in place, data privacy officer need to be appointed for any organization that is processing personal data in high risk. Now, coming to the record of processing activities and cross-border data transfer, organizations are required to maintain an up-to-date inventory of personal data, accounting to complete life cycle of the personal data element that are collated in every processing activity. Along with this, there is a requirement to document any transfers of personal data outside Saudi Arabia, if we are transferring it, along with the applicable transfer mechanisms and safeguards. Next is security for privacy and privacy by design. Here, what it means is that privacy should be integrated into the systems, applications, and business processes from the very design stage, supported by appropriate technical and organizational security control throughout the data lifecycle. And finally, the requirement of having a data privacy notices, policies, and controller processor registration, which says that the organization should maintain a transparent privacy notices for its customers, for its data subjects, at the consent collection points or at the point where they are interacting with the organization, and also internally the privacy notices. This is for the data privacy team and associates working on data privacy to clearly call out their roles and responsibilities. Apart from this, there is a requirement of registering the organization on the national registration platform. To meet the requirement, there is a requirement to go and register your organization if you are processing personal data. Now let's look at some of the practical steps the organization can take to establish an effective
Sorry to
privacy
interrupt.
program.
We have a question
Yes.
from Mr. Mohammed in the chat, and he's asking if the personal data can be transferred outside KSA. I know you have.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, definitely. Personal data can be transferred outside the KSA, but there are certain restrictions to that. We need to first assess what are the risks of transferring the personal data outside the region. If there are risks that can really harm the rights of individuals or data subject, then that level of cognizance need to be included to see if that transfer is even required. And if it is mandatory to have, we need to implement certain level of controls so that we do not harm the right of the data subject. Additionally, Sadaya has released various data transfer mechanism that needs to be taken into consideration while transferring the data outside the jurisdiction. That is standard contractual clauses, binding corporate rules, adequacy. The list of adequacy is yet not released by Sadaya. However, that if it comes for specific regions where the data transfer is allowed by the government, that could be taken into consideration. But we need to properly evaluate before transferring the data outside the jurisdiction.
Thank you, Hipsa. Hipsa, we have one more question. In fact, this is a question which I commonly get from customers across KSA. Is appointing a DPO mandatory requirement under
Yeah,
Sadaya?
as
You
I
might
mentioned,
question many times.
Yes. So as I mentioned while introducing the governance model as a requirement, I mentioned that for the organization which is processing the personal data in a high risk category. By high risk, we mean that if they process sensitive personal data, if they process large scale of personal data, if they are doing any kind of systematic monitoring on the personal data, or they are using new technologies such as AI on personal data, there are certain requirement, and very well stated by Sadaya, that in what cases we call it as high risk. In those high risk activities, and we see mostly with the customers such as, which is working in banking section, or who are conglomerates, do process the data in high risk activities somewhere or the other, but it is required for only entities which are processing the data in high risk. But it is always good and recommended to have a data protection officer. That is what our recommendation generally is, because even though appointing a data protection officer might not be a requirement for specific organization, but managing data privacy in totality is, and you should need to identify individual from your organization who can manage it for you, and they should have relevant resources and experiences for that.
We have one more question. Mukund, should we take it up now or keep it towards the end?
The best person to answer that is going to be Smriti, because we have got a few more case studies, etc. So, but yeah,
Smriti, can we take one more question?
I think you should
Yeah,
let's
Hifza, so
take
this is on the registration requirement with Sadaya. So
Yes.
we can just
I'll
focus
repeat
on that.
it. Yeah.
Yeah.
Are there any certain requirements to register with Sadaya, and what the initial information must need to have during registration? Also, if there is
Yes.
any time after registration to comply.
Yes, definitely. For all the organization that process personal data, they need to register themselves as a controller on a national registration platform. So as a controller, you definitely need to register basic level of information such as your CR number, who you are appointing as the representative for the company, that their name, their contact details, what type of high level processing you are doing. For that, you need to explain a little bit. Apart from that, if there is additional section of registering a data protection officer, so there is a test which is taken up, you can opt for it on the national data registration platform, and it shows that if you require a data protection officer or not. It's a test of 2 to 3 questions which clearly tell you that you require a data protection officer or not. And if the answer is yes, you also need to register the DPO on the data registration portal.
It's always suggested that whenever you are filling the registration details, in case you have any queries, you also get your legal team involved just to verify the information. So
Yes.
the entire documentation, specifically the step-by-step registration, everything is provided on the platform. So Sadaya has given those instructions as well. In case you have any queries with respect to the CR number and company-related information that needs to be filled in, it's always better that you get your legal team also involved in the review.
True. Shall we move ahead, Amrita?
Sure.
Okay. Now, as we have already discussed the different requirement of KSA PDPL as an elements, what we need to do. Now, let us look at some of the practical steps the organization can take to establish the effective privacy program. A successful privacy program requires a combination of governance, process, and technology, and employee awareness. So, the first recommendation from our side is to have a clarified accountability. One of the fundamental element of effective privacy program is establishing clear ownership and accountability. Privacy should not be considered as sole responsibility of a legal professional or compliance function. Since personal data is processed across different business functions, the accountability should also be distributed across the organization while maintaining the clear oversight. The second recommendation is to establish a comprehensive privacy framework. Organizations should develop a structured and scalable privacy framework that covers complete data lifecycle. From data collection to data deletion, it should be covering data processing activity management, record of processing activity management, data subject rights management, consent management, complete requirement of conducting privacy impact assessment and associated assessment, also the breach management. So having an effective and complete privacy framework is a must. The third recommendation is leverage privacy operations tools. The organization process increases the volumes of personal data across multiple systems. Managing privacy manually became very challenging. So, privacy operation tool can help you in automating most of the privacy operations, such as assessments or classification through data subject classification through data management, streamlining key privacy activities such as data subject request management, breach management, as you can collate all the set of personal data breaches into the breach register. So this will help you in automating the entire privacy landscape and help you in improving the efficiency consistently and visibility while reducing the operational effort. The fourth recommendation is start with the risk-based approach. Organizations should prioritize their privacy efforts based on the level of risk associated with different processing activities. Not all processing activities carry the same level of privacy risk. Therefore, organizations should focus first on the area involving sensitive personal data, large volume personal data, automated decision making, systematic monitoring, cross border data transfer, and high impact processing. The risk based approach enables the organization to allocate the resources effectively and address the areas with greater potential impact. The fifth recommendation is build employee awareness and privacy culture. Employee plays a very critical role in processing personal data because they interact with personal information on a daily basis. So the organization should provide regular awareness and role-based trainings to ensure employees understands their responsibility while handling personal data, how to identify and report privacy breaches or incidents, and importance of following the approved process, and how to respond appropriately to any kind of request that may come their way, how to direct it to the data protection officer. And at last, the last point that we need to cover is monitor and adapt organization. So organizations should continuously monitor and adapt data privacy program compliance within KSA PDPL, as it is not a one-time activity. It requires regular reviews, internal audits, periodic assessments to ensure privacy controls remain effective. With this, I would like to hand over the stage to Smriti. Smriti, over to you.
Thank you, Hifza. So there's a polling question that is there on the screen. As organizations, have you identified all the departments that own personal data? So identification, like we told you, is the first step to discover personal data. So have you identified the departments within your organizations that hold and process PII? We can look forward to your answers now.
Smriti, can you just give a one-line descriptor as to why this is important? Why should everybody identify all the departments that own PII? Very quick
Yes,
answer.
yes, yes. The quick answer to this ties back to the scope of the law. The scope of the law is personal data. So it is about protection of personal data. It is about protecting personal data identifiers. Any data that does not identify an individual will be outside the scope of this law. So it is very important because today, as organizations, we also see that a lot of organizations are involved in B2B transactions. Typically, you might not even involve personal data in your processing activities, right? So it's very important identification of the departments and the processes that are holding personal data within your organization. So that's the answer to this, Mukund. Do we have the results with us, Mukund?
It's very interesting. 75% of the customers say that they haven't identified all departments that own PII.
Yes, this is also something that we have seen. So all these organizations probably are starting with their journey of PDPL. And that's the reason we always mention that from a foundation point of view, it's very important you understand what all your business operations are. And it's very important that you have an understanding and done on the identification of the personal data within your environment. So that's the first step. And that's where we will move on to our next slide as well. So now that we have explored the building blocks of data privacy program, we are now going to talk about some of the case studies that we have worked on, some of the real life implementation challenges. And with that, Divyansh, could you please share some of the real life common implementation insights that we have seen where privacy has taken a back seat, or we have seen organizations, commonly violating the privacy principles?
Thanks, Smriti, for that. And thank you, audience, for answering the questions around not identifying the departments that are there processing personal data and other poll questions. So, those are the kind of scenarios that we also see as consultants in the day to day activities for the different organizations, that they are sitting on a lot of personal data. But the very first basic thing, that what all personal data is processed in different departments, is something that they are not aware about. Secondly, the other compliance measures that were beautifully explained by Hifza come into picture only once you sit on the base of the personal data that you have identified from the different departments. So, from that perspective, some of the key issues that we also see on a day-to-day basis from the real life projects that we do is we are not able to attach the legal basis for the processing activities that we are understanding. And that's where we as consultants come and help understand what processing of personal data will apply to which legal basis. And wherever we see it's maybe not contract, it's sometimes legal obligations, it's sometimes related to compliance with a law. But wherever it is consent, we definitely need to have a proper checkbox in place with a clear and granular notice for all the data subjects that are providing their consent. So we have helped organization identify wherever consent is there as a legal basis for the processing activity and do the compliance around it, maintain the logs of it, have a proper architecture in place to obtain the consent, log it, store it, and also to withdraw consent whenever any data subject wants to withdraw the same. Then one of the other key issues that we see day to day in different organizations is that there is use of privacy related technology, the automation platforms that help govern the privacy workflows. But that is sitting without a process foundation. Now, that is not as effective to use when you don't have a clear direction in place, that what your consent architecture is like, what kind of processing activities you have within your organization, what are your records of processing activities, what are your assessments. So as it was already explained, tool will only act as an enabler for you in terms of scaling these processes within your organization. So currently if you're doing say 100 processes, tomorrow you want to cover maybe 500 processes and you want to intake your data subject requests like 500, 1000, etc. on a daily basis, the tools will come into picture. They will help you automate these operations. They will help you automate these processes and manage them at a scale. But the basic foundation for you would lie in the privacy policies and procedures that you would have defined very, very customized as per your organization requirement, as per the personal data that you are processing, your internal gap assessment journey, your internal privacy impact assessment. Those are the basic framework or the foundation that helps you. And on the top of that, technology helps you build that. Then another key issue that we identify is the collection of data that is not required by the organization, which sometimes includes sensitive information also, like the religion related information, financial data, etc. Many of the departments have old archive related forms, formats in which they were doing the personal data collection processing activity, which they have not reanalyzed or rethought as per the upcoming requirements. And whenever they don't need data, they would still have their data on them, coming to them through the website teams, website forms, your mobile application, mobile app forms, and you won't even realize that now there is no purpose for us to process that data. So these are some of the common challenges that we get while working in the different organization. With that being stated, please help us understand, have you as a stakeholder identified all the personnel accountable for managing your data privacy program? So with that, we move to that poll. Looking forward to your inputs.
Divyansh, there is one question that I want you to answer. There's a question on the chat. Can you give examples of common data breach in organizations, please? I think this is a question.
Yeah, I think I'm sorry to interrupt, but I think the poll number 4 has come up before poll number 3. Is have you done any data privacy assessment? Have you assessed your data privacy landscape? Can you answer this? And if you really want a data privacy assessment, we are offering it free. I think by mistake the poll 3 question 4 came instead of the 3. But please answer this question. Have you done any data privacy assessment? Would you want it to be done by us? It's going to be free and of no cost.
Divyansh, you can take up that question, please, on the data breach. We can answer that parallelly.
I'm just waiting
So
for people to answer this. Just give me a second, Divyansh. We've also got some fantastic questions by Mr. Munir and Mr. Raj as well. So we will answer all those questions. We will not go without answering any questions that you may have. It's surprising, nearly 80% of them have not taken any privacy assessment. How does taking this data privacy assessment help? Smriti, if you can quickly answer them. Smriti or Divyansh, I know you've written an article on this. Divyansh, if you can answer that, that'd be great.
sure. I think a privacy impact assessment is the starting point for any organization to understand where they are in their data privacy journey. So it will help you get a clear picture of where you stand in terms of how you are managing your personal data, what policy process you have over it, and where you need to go forward. It is also something that just not helps us identify the gaps, it will also help you understand what all remediation actions are there needs to be in place in order to move you towards the compliance journey and to have a proper compliance roadmap in place. So to sum it up, it would act as a guiding light for you in terms of managing and developing your privacy program. Also, I think to take up the question on the data breach, so one, definitely the examples of breach when it comes to our mind would come around maybe some phishing attempts or maybe some malware attack that has happened, some systems that would have gotten compromised. But thinking about that at a deeper level, when we talk about day-to-day breach that is happening in organization, which is where the question is also around, we need to understand whoever does not need personal data and the personal data is made accessible to them, it is leaked, it is compromised, that would constitute as a breach. So one example for that could be a third party, probably with whom we have not signed a data processing agreement yet, where we are not ensuring how that third party is going to maintain the security and privacy of personal data. And without having that step, we have shared all the personal data with them. That is one example of a breach. Second example that may come to my mind is APIs, which are probably not required but are still there in place because they are running and continuously fetching the data from one data system to another. It is traveling maybe internally within your organization to your subsidiaries to any third parties, and those APIs are not addressed whether the personal data that is flowing through them is required to be shared or not. Then the another very common example would be if email access is not blocked on the personal devices, the employees may transfer some amount of personal data, probably intentionally or accidentally, to their personal devices. So these are some of the common examples, but we solve them through clear-cut policy measures, through clear-cut assessments that we do not just at an organization level, but at a process level to see what all data is being utilized in process, where all it is getting shared, and to have a proper visibility into all our data systems through technologies to understand what personal data is getting processed.
Yeah, you can move on to the next slide, Divyansh.
Sure. Now let's talk about a few case studies that we have implemented at Helen with our clients. So the first example that we are going to talk about is the automation, how we automated 100 plus processes for a retail conglomerate and help them move towards their privacy compliance journey. So the challenge that the organization was facing was that they had a privacy program in place, but they were relying on the manual processes, which means that there is no single source of truth for all the activities that are being done for the privacy program. And there is no centralized inventory that we have for managing the personal data related processes, which also means that there are no evidence collected on the personal data that is getting processed, what compliance measures we have, what kind of notices we have. So everything was manual in nature, everything was scattered. So from that perspective, automation was enabled to them through a privacy automation platform that helped them manage all their privacy impact assessments in a centralized manner, collect different evidences for it in terms of compliance, have a proper clear-cut reporting through dashboards for internal and external parties, automate the data subject requests that they were undertaking, automate the due diligence that they were doing for their different third parties and the vendors, automate any transfer impact assessments, legitimate interest assessments that they had to do, automate their consent collection process that was happening on the website, and also the cookies that we placed on our website for the tracking of personal data. So the impact that it had was that all the processes got automated. More than 300 privacy impact assessments were imported to the platform for the organization to see and understand how they are managing their privacy related processes. It also helped them move one step closer in their privacy maturity journey and streamlined any regulatory reporting, be it external or internal. Another related example we have is around a group holding company where the data was getting transferred within the entities. So, from the entity's perspective, there was no control on how the data is getting shared across different jurisdictions. So, this was a question and a major challenge around the cross border data transfer, where the data was moving outside of Kingdom without any safeguards that were there in place. So, in this example, the organization was helped with implementing a process around managing all the cross border data transfers. We help them execute the standard contractual clauses, which are a SADAIA requirement in case any data is getting transferred to the third party, which is outside the kingdom. And we ensured that whatever data they were transferring outside was necessary. So, in case we saw opportunities where we could minimize the data transfer, we implemented it through the data minimization. So the impact that it had on the organization was that they were able to freely transfer their data with proper safeguards and processes in place. Data minimization was done for the processes where the data was not required to be shared. And we ensured that proper privacy controls from the KSA PDPL were followed. Again, these are just two case studies to show you how we implement the privacy programs. And Smriti will probably move forward to help you understand in detail or approach on the same.
Right. Thank you, Divyansh.
Great.
So we
Smriti,
have
just,
discussed the yes.
I mean, please go ahead, but I just wanted to tell you that we have some very interesting questions from three or more people. So you need to keep that extra time for that questions as well. Yeah.
All right. All right. So we have discussed the regulatory landscape and the strategies organizations can adopt to strengthen their privacy posture. Now, as Alan Cyber, we support organizations from multiple maturity levels to comply with KSA PDPL requirement. As an organization today, we have executed more than 45 plus data privacy projects where 25 plus projects are only in alignment with KSA PDPL. So from a consulting standpoint, today we have services where we are providing end-to-end integrated approach for our customers. So for customers who are fairly new in their privacy journey, who want to understand what the law requirements are, who want to understand where the current maturity is, we provide them something as basic as a gap assessment service from Alan Cyber Consulting standpoint. Post gap assessment, we support the organizations in full fledged advisory and consulting, where we build the data privacy framework, policies, procedures, processes, and templates that are expected as per KSA PDPL. We also operationalize the requirements of KSA PDPL for the organizations as part of our advisory and consulting services, where we conduct privacy impact assessments, transfer impact assessments, and establish record of processing activities. Now, like we mentioned, that today technology is an enabler. So, if there are organizations who want to automate their data privacy journey, we have our technical implementation services where we support the organizations in automating their privacy operations. And then, from a stabilization standpoint, we also support organizations in continuous monitoring activities where our resources support the organizations in conducting as is privacy operations for the organizations, be it review of the policies, be it building new workflows within the privacy platforms. And lastly, we support the organizations in internal data privacy audits as well. So, from a services standpoint, we would want to mention that today Alan Cyber is a very well-known organization in data privacy space. If your organization is struggling to build KSA PDPL compliant programs, we are always there to help you because we have a service portfolio that is catering to customers from various maturity levels, and we have services which are starting from gap assessment till building the whole privacy program for our customers. So this is something that we offer, and if you are interested in our services, you can obviously reach out to our team. Amrita, we can move on to the next slide, please.
Sure. So, thank you to everyone who joined us today and for your active participation. We hope you found the session insightful and that it provided practical guidance for your privacy journey. We'll now open the floor for questions. If you have any queries or would like to discuss your organization's privacy or PDPL compliance needs, please share them in the chat and we are
Yeah.
happy to address.
So
I'll cover a few questions which is already there.
can you go to the next slide and start talking from the next slide? Yeah. Can somebody go to the next slide while Amrita takes up the question? Yeah. Next slide, please. Next slide. Yeah. So please go ahead, take those
Yeah.
questions.
We have a question from Mr. Byron. The PDPL requires DPO independence to avoid conflicts of interest. For organizations assigning DPO duties to existing companies or operational roles, what specific boundary controls does Ahlan recommend to satisfy Sadaya's audit expectations regarding impartiality? Maybe Smriti can take up this question.
Yes. So so this is absolutely true that the independence of DPO is a key requirement, and the reason for that is today you cannot have uh, your security requirements being taken care by the DPO because DPO role typically falls more, it's more aligned towards auditing and governance, right? Now an implementer cannot be an auditor, and that's the reason, a lot of laws, not just KSA PDPL but GDPR also talks about, independence of the roles of the DPO. Now from a Sadaya compliance standpoint, there is a specific document that is released by Sadaya to show the compliance towards the DPO requirement. There is a certain checklist that is available by Sadaya where it talks about the experience of the DPO, what kind of experience a DPO should have. And whenever you are hiring a DPO, there should be a documented contractual agreement that a DPO is assigned within your organization. And one of the other requirements that we have also seen that is being asked as part of the Sadaya audit is, today when you have an established data privacy office in place and you have a data privacy officer, has it been communicated throughout the organization? Now communication to the organization is a very key control requirement that is expected by Sadaya. And obviously from an evidence standpoint, you need to make sure that these points are taken into consideration.
Smriti, we have one more question from him. A draft PDPL framework relies on tight collaboration across operations, IT, HR, and quality. Does Ahlan have a recommended cross-functional framework or simple RACI metrics that effectively defines these departmental boundaries while satisfying Sadaya's governance expectations?
Yes, we do that. So even as part of our consulting exercise, and even if you are not going with the consulting exercise and you're trying to build something internally, we all need to understand that today privacy program cannot be run only by the data privacy office. Every department needs to have a department privacy champion. IT team has got certain role to play. Legal teams have got certain role to play. HR teams have got certain role to play. So whenever you are building your policies and procedures, it's always recommended that you build the RACI matrix. You clearly, communicate the requirements to the respective teams as part of the data privacy programs, because eventually, when the program is in the as is state, when once you are moving towards the operations, you would require collaboration from the department champions, in fact from each and every department that is holding personal data right within your organization. And without their coordination or without their collaboration, the assessments cannot take place. It would be impossible for you to identify any data privacy risks. So these are some of the operational challenges that you need to take into account. And even while setting up the governance structure, obviously you will have a data privacy office, but then every team, be it IT, be it legal, be it HR, be it marketing, they need to nominate a department data privacy champion, and they would have certain roles to play, which needs to be clearly called out in your policy and procedure document.
Thank you, Smriti. Mr. Byron, I
Okay.
hope it's clear now. We have
Yeah,
few more.
okay, cool. Yeah, oh, sorry, Amrita, please go ahead. There were a few questions in the webinar chat. Just wanted to.
Yes, yes. Yeah. So I am going through the questions now. Maybe Hifsa, you can take this up. There was a similar question uh, earlier. So the question is from Muhammad. After registration with Sadaya, is there any timeline to comply completely with PDPL? Also, is there any compliance assessment criteria, just like SAMA, which requires design, implementation, and effectiveness against each requirement?
So, the answer to that is no. Why? Because since 14 September 2024, PDPL has been fully enforceable. So the original 1 year grace period that was from 14 September 2023 to 2024 was already given to allow the organization to implement compliance. But after 14 September 2024, it is expected by all the organization to be compliant with the requirement of PDPL. And even when you are registering on the Sadaya platform, the national register, it is expected you to comply with the requirement in totality.
Thank you, Hifsa. There is another question, so maybe Divyansh can take it up. If the organization processing data outside Saudi for a healthcare on cloud, which is having data related to patient demographics and medical data, any Sadaya approval process required to process this?
I think the requirement here, in case the cloud storage is outside of the kingdom, would be around the cross-border data related safeguards that we have talked about. So if it is a third party, you can go ahead with the standard contractual clauses that are provided by Sadaya to sign. Before that, you also need to identify your relationship with the third party, if they are your independent controllers or they will be classified as your processors. This is also as per the framework provided by the PDPL itself. And with that, you can do a transfer impact assessment that would help you understand and mitigate any risks that may be there while you transfer that data, in terms of maintaining the security and privacy of that data in the hand of third parties. So from that perspective, you can ensure compliance with the SADAIA requirements as well.
Thank you,
Great.
Divyansh. Another question for
Just
you.
to add on to just to add on to Divyansh's point. So health data is sensitive data under KSA PDPL. KSA PDPL does not restrict you from transferring this data outside the kingdom, but then uh, a lot of controls need to be implemented if you are transferring this data outside the kingdom. So one of the things that you need to do immediately is to conduct a transfer impact assessment. You need to gauge the transfer risks that could be on the sensitive personal data. And second thing, you need to have standard contractual clauses or any cross-border transfer mechanism established as part of this requirement. So today, if you don't have these two things, you are in the risk of violation of this particular law.
Yeah, got it. Hey,
Also,
there
Smriti,
is one.
yeah,
Okay,
in
sorry.
addition to that, we need to also register on the national data governance because it's a sensitive, high risk activity going on. So that's also an addition.
Got it. Okay, there is one question from Raj, uh, Mr. Raj Kupuswamy. His question is, can you give examples of common data breach in organizations?
That is covered, Mukund. That has been
You
covered.
already answered that question, Mukund, sometime back.
Okay, sorry, I missed that, I guess. There are a
No
few
worries.
more questions. Amrita, can
One
you
more
pick that
question
up?
for Divyansh, maybe. During classification process, is this suggested that if we do a specific classification methodology, should we add another niche for personal data or amend the existing labels such as secret, etc., and handle accordingly?
I think, Hilsa, you want to take this up?
Yeah, sure. Yeah, so if you already have a data classification policy, you might not need to develop an entire policy altogether. You can incorporate the requirement of data privacy in the existing classification policy only, and that would suffice.
Thank you, Ipsa. Smriti, this one is for you. Please explain the implementation of data privacy requirement if policies and procedures are in place.
I'm sorry, but the question is not clear here. So the question here, I think, is please explain the implementation of data privacy requirement if policies and procedures are in place. Okay, so they want to get some details on this. So
Yeah.
when we look into a data privacy program, Razan, the program touches upon both the process aspect of it and the technology aspect of it. So let's say today you want to conduct privacy impact assessment. So my question to you would be, do you have a privacy impact assessment process in place? Has it been documented? What is the methodology basis on which you are gauging the privacy risks? What is the risk matrix going to be? So for every requirement in SADAIA PDPL, specifically when we look into all those 40 plus articles, there has to be a process established within the organization. It should be documented and it should be approved by the stakeholders. So that is where we say that today, if you are an organization which is very early in the data privacy journey and you think that you can bring in a tool and the tool is going to help you comply, that's not going to happen, because for every tool to be enabled, you need the process and the policy in place. So there has to be a policy for data subject rights management. There has to be a policy for consent management, and similarly, the other requirements of KSA PDPL. So when you start building the framework for data privacy, you would realize that a lot of policies, procedures, and templates need to be created in order to ensure your compliance towards KSA PDPL requirements.
Thank you, Smriti. The other question that we have from Muhammad is, what is the compliance assessment criteria? How mature each control is? How does Ahlan do this?
Okay. So compliance assessment criteria. So mature. So unlike many other regulations, so as an organization, we are not just building data privacy programs. We also have multiple business units who help organizations in building their cybersecurity programs as well. Now, when you look at data privacy as a whole, there is no specific compliance criteria that has been given by Sadaya to gauge your current privacy maturity. However, when Alhan Cyber builds it for the organization, we refer to some of the global standards of privacy maturity assessments. So we have some frameworks that are already accepted worldwide, and we use it and we refer it to make sure that the current maturity assessment of the organization is done. But again, these are global standards. These are not something which has been recommended or even has been obligated by Sadaya. So we use global standards for gauging current privacy maturity, and this is something that we do for our customers as part of our consulting assignments. Emma.
Thank you, Smriti. We have one more question about the regulatory documents. Can you name all the regulatory documents that are available by Sadaya and NDMO which can help understand the local privacy requirements? Divyanshu or
So
Hipsa?
generally, yeah, so we don't provide it until and unless, we start with our consulting exercise. However, and that is where we say that when you're starting with these programs, it's very important that you have somebody from your team understanding how to interpret the law requirements. So as Alan Cyber, from a consulting standpoint, if you need our support, definitely we are more than happy to arrange a call, and then we can discuss what the requirements are.
Thanks, Smriti. Mukund, did I miss any questions?
Yeah. There is one question from Mr. Uh, Samiullah Sharif. Can you give examples of controls and how to make Mr. Sharif? The second part of the question isn't clear.
Yeah.
So can you please rephrase it, or if you want to ask us, we can help your voice chat.
Can you name it, Mukund, again? Let me allow him to talk.
His name is Samiullah Sharif. Can you enable him to chat?
Yeah. Mr. Samiullah Sharif, please, you can unmute and ask your question. I think there might be an issue with his mic, actually.
Great.
I could see he has unmuted it, but we couldn't hear him.
Hello.
Yeah. He's back. Go ahead, sir.
Hello.
We can hear you. We can hear you, sir. Please go ahead.
Yeah. Gentlemen. Hello.
Yes, sir. Please go
Yeah,
ahead.
my
We can
question
hear
is
you.
very simple. So, like you were talking about the controls. Controls. Give me an example of how to make a control among part. Maybe the for the what you call data breach. Some example for the data control system. Thank you.
I think the question is around the different examples for the controls that we would build while assessing any organization. So, to answer your question, the control would depend primarily on the kind of assessment we are doing. So, if we are doing it at an organization wide level, we would ask questions like: do you have an implemented process for conducting data privacy impact assessments? Do you have a process for consent management? Have you considered whether you qualify for appointing a DPO? What criteria you have followed. So the framework that we follow is coming from the requirements of PDPL and different guidelines that we have from Sadaya. And it changes the framework when we move to the processes at an applications, because at a process level, we would try and understand if within the process, what is the legal basis, and if it is consent, whether we have taken the consent or not. If we have provided a granular privacy notice, if we are collecting the data from any data subject facing channel in the process. So these would be some examples. At a process level, at a system level, we would be more interested to understand what are maybe the encryption measures, what are the backup related measures. So this is how we would develop controls, primarily by taking into consideration the regulatory requirements, the global standards and frameworks like NIST and GDPR frameworks. Then customizing it as per the applicability of the organization, and within that, what assessment we are doing. If we are doing it an organization level, assessment level, vendor level, or a process level. I hope that helps you get an understanding of the idea that we move forward with in the compliance programs.
Thanks, Divyash. Samira, I hope it's clear. We have one more
Okay,
question. Yeah. Can the data
Sure.
management office be merged into information security department? Would there be any conflict of interest? Just like ISO 27701 that extends ISO 27001 and requires extension inside the existing ISMS and converts it into an IS and PMS. Maybe Smriti or Hipsa?
Yes, okay. I'll answer the question. So typically, we do not recommend that data protection office to be completely merged with the information security office. However, it is not something that is not doable. Why don't we recommend is because there are certain requirements from information security which might conflict with the overseeing privacy risk as important, because some of the factors of data privacy, which is in information security, it works on availability as one of the principle, wherein privacy we do consider as limited information to be used, which is data minimization, right? So we can have it as one department, but we have to ensure that it is governed separately. The individuals who is leading the program of data privacy are different, and the reporting structure is different. We do not directly report to the same authority who is also managing information security. That is what we recommend. I hope that answers your question.
Thank you, Hipsa. Any further questions? We'll be sharing the presentations and the slides with
I
you
don't think
shortly
there are
after.
any other questions, but in case you have it, please go ahead and ask. We'll be happy to answer them. Or you can reach out to Amrita. We will be sending you all the recorded material and the webinar and so on and so forth. So thank you so much for your time and patience and for all those fantastic questions.
On behalf of Ahlan Saiba, we thank you once again for your time.
Oh, one second, hold on. There is one last question.
Yes. Okay.
I think one last question. NDMO and PDPL, how are they intertwined for effective implementation?
Smriti, would you like to take it up? He wants to understand how they can be intertwined for effective implementation, NDMO and PDPL.
Yes, thank you, Amrita. So NDMO is a data governance requirement, whereas PDPL is typically focusing only on the personal data management. Now, there is one domain of NDMO, which is domain 14, which is in alignment with the PDPL requirements. And that is where we see that as a firm, Alan Cyber as a consulting division can support you. However, NDMO in itself needs to be looked separately altogether because it's a data governance requirement. So whenever you're going forward with a full-fledged data governance program, privacy would only be a part of it, which is domain 14 of NDMO, and that would cover your PDPL requirements as well.
Okay,
Yes,
cool.
so complying with NDMO should suffice, but for domain 14, you just need to make sure that all the control requirements of PDPL are already covered, because there would be some delta level controls in PDPL. So typically, if you want to build this program, when you are considering domain 14 of NDMO, there are approximately 8 to 9 control requirements which are touching on data privacy. We would suggest that you also go through the PDPL requirements and implement the delta controls as part of the entire program. Ahmed. With that, we thank you all for joining our session, and we'll be closing the session now. Please feel free to drop any message to our team in case you require support